Oh, it's volunteer to be one.
Okay.
And we could have a second note taker. Again, this is just for the first 45 minutes, and then it's payload. So, anybody else? No. Anybody else on a laptop? Or? Yeah. All right, fine. I'll try. But then I can't do the JavaScript for your session. And I'd like someone to be the JavaScript for the ICC. Magnus, I see you joined the Java room. Do you want a JavaScript?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. I'm in the room, but I also have to share. AVTCORE, yeah. The working group we decided is still AVTCORE because it made the life easier for the data tracker. Even though I kind of wanted to resurrect the old AVT group so that we could again be the oldest group in the IETF. But yes. What? Oh, you're presenting, right? So, yeah. So okay. So you can't note take. Let's see. Mo, can I get you to note take? Okay.
He's doing the payload slides.
Oh, he's doing the payload slides. Okay, that's important. Bernard, you're in the front row.
Well, I can join the chat room and actually do it in there.
Okay. Okay. Or the or the Etherpad. So Bo is doing Etherpad. So you just have to fix his typos. That's probably easier than. All right. So it is 1:32. So we're already 2 minutes behind schedule. So, but we have note takers, which is Bo and Bernard doing an Etherpad, and we have Magnus in the Java room. If you're remote, also if you're on Meetico, we have our fancy red button. So if you want to participate remotely and actually talk to us using some of the protocols that we invented, how exciting! I'm pretty sure. Then it's using floor control and it's using WebRTC, so it's using RTP, which is this working group's protocol. So so you do that if you can, unless you haven't brushed your hair today or something and you're embarrassed. Well, you can do voice only also anyway, but if you need to, say Magnus will also relay. All right, this is the new Notewell. It's not the same as the old Notewell, though it's not very different as I understand it. I think they mostly just added the additional anti-harassment policies and things like that. But I think there was also a BIS of one of the relevant RFCs. But don't ask me, I'm not a lawyer. What? I think privacy policy was added, and I think I think they just list the things by BCP, not RFC number, so we don't need to update it when they rev the BCP. Okay. Agenda. We'll start with the RMCAT feedback message that Colin is doing. That's for the condition control work coming out of RMCAT. And then Ronnie has his presentation about adding a frame priority header extension, and then we're done and move over to payload, which I think if we finish early, we'll let payload take over right away. Because we've got XR block after payload, because we're basically resurrecting the old AVT group. We're just doing it, with musical chairs, literally. So no new documents since last time, no new published RFCs. Our misrefs continue. Multipath RTP has expired. Nothing has happened with that. I think we
Do have to discuss what should we do with this?
with multipath. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. What should we? I mean, my suggestion last time is that we should was to take multipath off the milestones, and if somebody wants to bring it back, they can. I suggested that last time. Somebody said no, I might want it, but there has nonetheless not been a lot of attention to that. So is there any objection at this point to taking multipath RTP off the milestones? And
Bernard about Microsoft. No objection because I don't think there's an alternative. But
Well,
I
we
will
just-
say that multipath is likely to be deployed anyway in a non-interoperable way as a result.
well, I mean, if you want to do something non-interoperable, we can't stop you.
Well, it's no specs, so there's no.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, would you? I assume when you say I assume this is Microsoft doing this.
There are multiple non-interoperable implementations.
Would they rather multiple interoperable implementations? And if so, would they be willing to devote?
Probably if there was a spec, yeah.
Are they willing to put effort into the spec? Because it's apparently right now. I mean, I'm happy to reassign it to a different
Part
author.
of the issue is it's
Or rather.
not just multipath RTP, it's multipath ICE. So, if the IETF isn't willing to get its hands around this problem, you can't just do one of those two things.
Right.
Colin Pagan. I mean, these are presumably separable parts. No?
Well, they're separable parts, but you need both of
I
them.
mean, you need both of them, clearly. Yeah. But is there any benefit in writing this spec for one part and getting interoperability on at least everyone doing this one part of it the same way, even if they don't do the other part the same way?
Sure, but if you're, like as an organization, the IETF takes on one, it's kind of logical to do the other one.
Yes.
I'm not saying it's bad to do
I mean,
just one of them,
I think
or that you should not do one of them.
as an individual, I think it would be very reasonable for you to bring a multipath ICE to the ICE working group or possibly dispatch. But that is certainly not in this
This is
remit.
kind of
remit
a
this
pattern
group.
in the IETF. The IETF takes on a task, does a piece of it, leaves large portions of it non-interoperable, and we end up with stuff not working. This is the kind of how this organization works. I'm just pointing it out again.
This is Ben, as area director. IETF is a volunteer organization. We can certainly work on that if people want to work on it. It's just, I'm assuming that we don't have enough people that want to work on it, or we would be doing it. By work on it, I mean actually write the draft and everything.
See, the way this actually works is when you don't charter the work to actually make the thing successful, right? When we charter a piece but not the rest of it, people look at this and go, okay, you obviously
Well,
don't care.
the problem is multipath RTP predates ICE,
Right.
amazingly.
Yeah. So it's not just, we should ask people to work on it, because people look at this and go, oh yeah, I could do this, but it won't work anyway. And you haven't charted the other work and there's nothing really happening.
I mean,
So it's-
my suggestion would be bring multipath ICE to either ICE or dispatch, and then finish multipath RTP here, working with that.
they kind of have to go together though.
Well, I'm
Some
not saying this would. I mean, once we had multipath ICE, we would rewrite multipath RTP to work with it.
And in some ways, multipath ICE is more important because there's
Scenarios that multipath ICE could do that don't require all.
Oh,
of
sure, it's a
multipath
broader
ICE.
solution than just RTP.
They're kind of related.
As the area director, I would have no objection to adding multipath ICE to whichever charter we think it belongs on.
So, what is the upshot for this working group? See if somebody actually does come up with multipath ICE in time for Montreal and park it for now.
Colin Perkins, it seems like the suggestion for this working group is to drop it unless someone is willing to bring back a proposal to do multipath ICE as well.
Does backburner mean drop the milestone? Or does it mean
Drop the milestone, because clearly no one is working on it right now, and encourage people that if they're interested in this problem, we know how to do it, and it involves two pieces of work.
okay? We will send an email to the mailing list to that effect, saying that we're dropping the milestone, but we encourage people who are interested in this work to bring the entirety of all the work necessary for a real solution to the appropriate working groups. All right. Multiplex guidelines, where are we on that? Ronnie? Oh, he's Ronnie is not paying attention.
Hi, Colin Puggins. So the multiplex guidelines stalled in that a bunch of us started writing it and then sort of lost the will to live and gave up. And Ronnie decided it was important and would resurrect it, but then I think it stalled again. I'm unconvinced there is value in it, but I'm not objecting if someone else thinks it's valuable.
No, I know. I volunteered to do it, and we had someone doing the actual editoring from Huawei, but he is not. He changed position, so I'll continue with that. I mean, just to finish it, so we'll have it. But if people feel there's no real value, I don't know. I mean, but anyhow, we're progressing, right, Magnus?
Yeah, it's slowly, I would say, in some sense. But I mean, we did an update before the last meeting, and there's some, I think, open issues, etc., which needs to do. There is more text needed and more editing needed. So,
All right, and then finally on frame marking, I think we have you what? Okay, yeah. So so we did a working group last call. Yeah, I guess Mo can talk to it.
Yeah, Mozinati. We had some comments that were all largely editorial. I had to noodle a bit about your comments about the TL0 pick index wrapping on IDR or not, and the use of the IBIT when spatial layers don't refresh. But I didn't see a hard need to do anything different normatively for either one of those. I think it's acceptable to let people do the handling whichever way they want for both those issues, because I don't think there's going to be a major benefit to doing or specifying one certain way.
I think that as a receiver, you need to know which way the sender is doing it. You know, whether there's normative language or what, but they behave differently in terms of.
We can add some more clarification text around the scenarios, but I don't think we want to enforce anything normatively either way. Either prohibit streams that do it one way, or tell receivers that they can always count on it being this way. I think either of those would be a bad thing to put in the spec. But we can add some clarification text around what the scenarios are. And all the other comments were largely editorial and clarification as well. Good clarifications.
That's right. I wrote it long enough ago. I don't remember what I said.
So for the IBIT, it was, do you want to prohibit layer structures where spatial layers do not refresh when base layers intra refresh?
Mm-hmm.
And what's the meaning of the IBIT in that case? I think it's as written, IBIT is per layer. So
Okay.
it doesn't infer anything to have a base layer with an IBIT set. Doesn't mean that the spatial enhancement layers are going to also have their IBIT set. So I think the current semantics work okay, but I'll add some clarifying text around that. And the other issue was the TL0 pick index wrapping on an intra picture or not. And again, I don't think we want to prohibit formats that do or don't, because we already have two big formats that do it differently.
Right. Yeah. So I basically say that on an intra TL0 pick index is basically unspecified.
Yeah. So I think I'll add some clarifying text about why it can be one way or the other depending on the payload format. But we won't have anything normative about requiring it. And the other thing is that we had a new IPR disclosure. We already had one before, but the terms were pretty permissive, basically RF if you don't bug us. But the new disclosure is just FRAND. Possibly royalty bearing declaration there. So everyone please take a look at that and make your evaluations about it. I'll try to get the new version out by the end of the month, by the end of March.
Okay, great. And then if there were, and I guess if you're making technical decisions on things, respond to the, I guess if you respond to like my email where there are actually technical questions, not just editorial, try to raise them on the list too, just so we can make sure that they're called out and people can respond if they disagree with those decisions.
This is Ben Campbell. Can you make sure that the question about are there any problems with the IPR disclosure gets asked on the list?
Okay, we'll make sure of that. Notes, please make sure that we know that's reflected so we remember to do that. Probably, I mean, procedurally it makes more sense for the chairs to do it, I think. Yeah. Well, we haven't allocated a shepherd yet, I don't think, but it'll be it'll be the chair. What? We usually do that at that last call, but I guess I could do it earlier. It'll probably be me anyway, so whatever. Okay, so that's it for that. Colin, you're next. Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, okay, here.
I'll just show the next slide.
Oh, you do your brother. Okay, rather me do it.
It would. Hi, I'm Colin Perkins. I congratulate you in having the first room where I can actually read the monitor.
It's
And
totally my
see
doing.
the slides.
I placed it there myself.
Absolutely. Next slide, please. I'm here to talk about the TCP congestion feedback draft. So we've been discussing this in RMCAT for some number of months now, and at the last meeting there was a decision to adopt this as an AVT core document, and we submitted the 00 AVT core working group draft in October 2017, which was identical to the design team output from RMCAT. And then just before this meeting, we submitted a 01 update, which is a much more substantial update. The summary of the changes in the 01 update is on here. We figured out the values for the timestamps and the formatting of the timestamps, and adjusted the arrival timestamp clock rate. I made a bunch of clarifications on what gets reported in which packets and how to handle sequence number wraparound and that sort of thing. And I'll talk about much more about that in a second. We also just gave some, expanded the security considerations, clarified the draft throughout, cited the CC feedback draft for the timing rules and so on and so on. Next slide. Okay, so looking at the technical changes, in the previous version of the draft, the report timestamp, which indicates when this congestion control feedback was sent, was very ill specified. The draft said it should be derived from the same wall clock used to timestamp RTP packet arrivals, suggested that a clock resolution of about a tenth of a millisecond made sense, but didn't specify anything else. So we would have needed some signaling to say what clock rate was being used, what the resolution was, how the clock was derived, and so on. And the draft didn't define any of that signaling. What the new version of that draft does is says that you use the same clock you use to generate the NTP timestamp in the sender report and the receiver report packets, and you format it in the same way as the NTP timestamp in those packets. And that gives you a 1/65,000th of a second clock resolution, which is more accurate than that which was suggested before, and has a sufficient range that it covers all the appropriate values. And it's a clock you already have if you have an RTP implementation. So it seemed easier to just mandate an existing clock source than to define some signaling and make everyone go to the complexity of having signaling different versions and having to agree on what was the right thing. So that was the first change. Next slide. The second change, once we did that, the arrival time offset fields, which show the difference for when the arrival time of an RTP packet relative to that timestamp field, were previously specified in milliseconds. They're now specified in 1,024th of a second, because that gives an integer offset from the report timestamp with the new definition. And okay, it's a slightly different value, but it fits more neatly into the existing clocks and so on. Next one. No, back one. So I guess the question is, does this make sense? and I get the question for RMCAT is, does it make sense for the congestion control algorithms? I guess the question for this group is, does it make sense for an ICP usage point of view? Is this a sensible clock and formatted in an appropriate way? And if anyone has objections to this proposal, I'd certainly like to hear them.
I don't feel like standing up, but my main concern would be if you're obviously comparing these arrival times to your sending times, and if the arrival times are, there's probably your system, your operating system is not giving you these times in 1,024ths of a second, so you might end up with rounding.
Yeah, the operating system's probably giving you microseconds or nanoseconds.
Right.
Yeah. Sure.
Or some arbitrary system clock, which you have to convert anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. You're going to get those roundings pretty much any way you specify it, I guess. So, yeah. I tend to think that is probably unimportant for the level of accuracy we care about, and it's cleaner to specify it this way. But
it's just I'm inclined to probably agree, but
yeah, there's certainly a rounding issue somewhere. Yeah, I agree. Okay, next slide. All right. Some of the other changes, we specified what happens if you don't get any packets from an SSRC in a reporting interval. And the recommendation here is if you don't get any packets, you don't send a report. And you should send a regular sender report or receiver report in that case. And typically you'll be sending the congestion feedback as part of a compound packet, which has one of those anyway. But the suggestion is if you don't get any packets which you would send congestion feedback on, you send a reception report block that says the highest sequence number is unchanged. So you know that nothing has been received. I guess the alternative here would be to send a congestion feedback packet which has the beginning sequence equal to the end sequence equal to the last sequence number you reported on, which would also show that there was nothing sent. And we'd have to specify what you would do if you never got any packet. We could work through that. To me, it doesn't seem worth the overhead, but if people thought that was easier, we could certainly suggest that was done. Next one. The other thing we did was specify what sequence numbers you should include in each report, and the previous version of the draft didn't specify what sequence number ranges were in each report. The new one just says you report on all the packets you got, and the sequence number range in report N starts one packet after the report, the range in packet N minus 1. So they're just consecutive blocks. It's doing the obvious thing. It says the ranges should not overlap. If they do overlap, we specify that information sent in a later report updates that in an earlier report. So if it says a packet arrived and didn't in the previous report, then that counts as arrived.
Question? Yes. Again, it's individual, and I'm still not standing up. Is that later in arrival time or later in, you could, in theory, if this is multiplexed with SR, you could get the sending time of the compound RGCP.
I'm not sure I understand.
Basically, I'm worried if you have RGCP reordering on the wire, but you could actually infer the sending times of the RGCP.
The reports have got an exact timestamp in, so you know the.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So that's right. Of course, it's exact. So this will be based on the report timestamp.
So it's based on the report timestamp.
Not arrival.
If a block with a later report timestamp.
Okay. So later in the sense means later report timestamp, not later arrival at the receiver.
Yeah. So if a packet arrives late, so it was not in a previous report, and you could send a new report which overlaps that range and say that you got that packet. I tend to think it's not worth it because it arrives too late to be useful for congestion control in pretty much every case anyway. But yeah, we had to specify what would happen if you did it. And in addition, we put in some discussion about handling sequence number wraparound, and I put in some words about if you get a packet which is more than 1/4 of the sequence number space ahead or behind, you ignore it on the basis that you start getting confusion as to whether it's a very delayed packet or something far ahead. So it's just easier that way. Next slide.
I'm just sorry. I'm before you do that. I'm just thinking about the. Sorry, the sequence number thing. I'm concerned about like cases where if a source has been off for a long time and then comes back and now maybe you were.
Well, the sequence number should only go up by 1 in that
Sure.
case.
Well, it depends on why it was off. I mean, if you had an outage and then it came, a net split and then it came back or something like that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So
It's not clear what you do at that point because I suspect it's ambiguous as to which it should be, and
yeah. And there's also
we maybe need some words to say what to do there. Sure. Okay. Other than that, we just made a bunch of clarifications. Essentially, we fixed the security considerations, specified that sequence numbers can wrap around, and you have to handle that, and delegate it to the RMCAT draft for the guidance for how you configure our TCP so you get the appropriate amount of feedback, and just did a bunch of editorial fixes. Okay, that's all I have.
I had one other comment on the draft, which maybe I should have sent to the list. You had a comment in there to the effect of you should send feedback for every source which is doing congestion control, which seems like a very wiggly statement. How do you know which remote sources are doing congestion control?
The draft doesn't specify.
Yes,
I would
noticed.
guess you have negotiated some parameters for that congestion control. But yes.
Where will these parameters be specified?
Okay, good question.
I would think that it should be in this draft, in fact.
I mean, we should maybe specify a parameter that says you need to send this feedback.
Right. Yeah. Well, clearly, we need an SDP saying, "Hey, I support this feedback message." At the very minimal.
Sure.
And then, but if you
And
actually wanted to have
that's
this
probably
case,
that's probably all we need.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's your wording there implied you might have like some of these sources are congestion controlled and some aren't. Presumably, the use case I think of was audio and video or something like that. But
I don't think I was thinking that much, but yes.
yes. But if we have a case where some are and some aren't, you have to have some way of saying which are and which aren't.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. We will need to specify some signaling to say send this feedback.
At the very minimum, and then if you
the rest would be congestion feed control algorithm specific.
Right, probably. But I would not be inclined to have some way of saying some sources should get this feedback and some shouldn't, because that doesn't seem like it'd be useful. But if somebody thinks we should, then we need to have some way of saying that.
I could imagine that some sources are not going to respond to this feedback, and I agree that they should, but they're not going to, so there's no point.
Yes, but
sending
the
it.
other sources could potentially, accommodate themselves if they're sharing a 5 tuple anyway.
Potentially, yeah, but they're not necessarily sharing a 5 tuple. So.
True.
But yeah, I mean, we can put the signaling in as an RTCP thing and possibly as an SSRC specific thing if we care.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll do the obvious thing.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Oh yeah, please review.
Yes. Well, I will go a little further than please. Can we have anybody who's willing to volunteer to review this? Harold volunteers to review it, and Bernard volunteers to review it. So, and Magnus. So, 3 people volunteer to review, which would be good if that all happens. So please send your reviews to the list.
I'm hoping Magnus's review will be very short, and he'll say we addressed all the comments from last time. But I suspect that won't be the case.
Jahid here. Just to inform, we have a GitHub that we internally maintain for the authors to interact. But if you want to do the review there as well, that might.
Okay, can you send email about what that GitHub is to the list? And
yeah, it's basically on my private personal repo. But
that's fine. I mean, all technical comments should be on the list. Editorial stuff can go to the GitHub.
Okay.
GitHub. Yeah.
Just process when you say move forward to WG last call at IETF102. I hope you are considering to have a working group last call before IETF102.
That would be good too.
If it's finished before, then
basically working group last call when when people think it's ready to go to working group last call.
Yes, yes. The 102 was my aspiration for when I thought we would get to it. But if we happen to go faster than that, that works for me. Because we are very, very efficient in this working group.
Yes. Just look at multipath RTP.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, and running.
Okay. The frame priority marking it's an extension to the priority marking that's now, I think it's finished. It's just need revision for a good luck call.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's done, so maybe we can discuss it as a separate document. Next slide. So currently the frame marking just have for the non-scalable a bit that says that there are that this frame is droppable. And by droppable, it means it must be decodable. Decodable, that's what it says. It doesn't provide any more information about it. And the problem is that, I mean, let's say we have a couple of frame marked as, even though there are no definition about which frames should be marked as droppable in the non-scalable one, it doesn't even allow for a middle box to decide if there are some of them and a couple of them, and it wants just to drop some of them anyway to decide which one to drop. It's arbitrary thing currently. So we're suggesting to add a priority value for the non-scalable stream droppable frame, which would be applicable to a single RTP stream. It's not to compare between different streams, but inside the stream to say which one, if you need to drop, which one you should drop first and which one you should drop later. So it proposed some extension to the frame marking document, and it allowed the middle box to discard part of all of the discardable frames as marked by the encoder. This provides more options to the middle box to address things like congestion control by deciding how many frames it wants, and to drop part of the frame in some better way than just doing it arbitrarily. It's allowed differentiation between reference and non-reference B frame, to drop first the non-reference B frame. Dropping frame, and this is more like our proposal about how we're currently testing how to do that, how to achieve these priorities, just to differentiate between non-reference B frame and reference B frame, and dropping P frame that are closer to the end of the group of GOP. It's better than dropping one at the beginning, can be marked as droppable with lowest priority. Next slide. So what we're suggesting is to adding 2 bits from the 4 must be 0 bits when 00 is the highest priority and 11 is the lowest. So 00 it still keeps the interoperability with the current document when it's for the marking. This works even if the priority is present but not supported by the middle box, because the droppable will be 1, and then we have the 00, which will be the same as before. It doesn't break any interoperability with the current frame marking proposal. Okay, next one. So we're just asking the working group to adopt that. We are currently, and like I said, we are currently did some tests, and we are testing it in the Wi-Fi routers where we use it in order to provide better quality in the Wi-Fi when we have to drop frame, and it works, provides good enough results.
So what is the use cases used in? Is this like IPTV type streaming, or?
Yes, mostly yes, it's IPTV type of streaming, mostly in the home network. And of course it's for the non-scalable.
Yeah.
One. Of course, scalable is.
Hi, Colin Perkin. So I have no objection to adopting the work. I do think that the issue all along has been defining how you do the marking.
How you do?
How you do the marking and how you decide which priority is to put on with which frequency. And I haven't seen anything in the draft to
Okay,
really consider that.
So basically, I wrote some of the way that we are doing based on the B frame and P frames, but we can add it to the document if it's not there. I mean, to explain what at least. I mean, again, it's up to the encoder to decide which frames he wants to decide which one are less or higher priority, and that's why I said it's not for comparing between two different streams. It's in a single stream to figure out if you want to drop which one you should better drop than which one should not.
I'm not sure that works. I think you need to define the marking, how the marking rates map onto drop probabilities if you want to have any sort of consistent behavior from the middle boxes.
So more like to explain which one we are marking as different, which priority. Okay, well, that's part of what I try to go back to slides.
I mean, otherwise you have a middle box by one vendor and a codec from another
so
vendor.
Go back to slide.
You don't know what rate at which the marking will happen, so you don't know how frequently you drop a marked packet.
But the middle box doesn't. The middle box will not. I mean, it depends what the encoder will put inside. It has nothing to do with what the middle box just see the priority and can decide accordingly.
But in order to make a sensible decision, it needs to know the marking rates and the likelihood of marking. Because otherwise, it can't decide what fraction of packets to drop.
So to know how, because it depends how many it wants to drop and figure out which priorities it wants to drop.
Yeah, basically, our zeros, 90% of the stream or 10% of the stream.
Okay.
So Magnus Westlund, channeling Tom Peterson. How will this spec consider streams that may have FEC, or should it explicitly declare it should not be present?
I continue with some.
FSC, if it should, I mean, this spec consider streams that may have FSC in them, or is it totally out of forbidden markings?
Again, this is part of the way how you can get the receiver to address it, whether it's FCC for the correction or you have some other mechanism. You talk about some error recovery on the receiver side.
Interpreting the question in this case, I would think, can you use it to mark the FSC stream also?
Probably yes, but I don't think if he drops it, they were not the ones he will try to drop. But I mean, the recovery on the receiver side can be multiple ways. I mean, there are things that are doing just motion estimation or things like that in order to recover afterwards without any FEC or anything in those cases.
Yeah. So Bernardo about Microsoft, FEC is typically hop by hop, right? So the conference unit would take it, recover if it wants to, but it's not going to just forward the FEC. It has to reconstruct. So why would you use this for an FEC stream or an RTX stream? Does that make any sense?
No.
Okay, but with respect to the draft itself, my suspicion is it's not likely to be that frequently implemented by the streaming video people I know. The people who would use the B frames. Certainly, if someone else has a different opinion, they can speak up. But
at least
that's my sense.
Yeah. So at least this one, I mean, this is implemented in our environment. I mean.
I get the feeling that the Chinese streaming video ecosystem is rather different than the North American.
I can't compare this.
Yeah.
But this, by the way, this is done in the Israeli laboratory, not outside.
Okay.
Mosenati, just on the previous FEC comments, so frame marking is currently defined, cannot be used for FEC streams. It's for only video payload formats, can't be applied to audio or FEC payload streams.
It depends how you send the FEC, basically. If you send FEC inside the stream, then.
What I mean is you cannot attach a frame marking extension to a FEC packet.
Of course.
You can only attach it to the
I mean, if it's a
real
payload,
video
if it's
frames.
a payload format that has some sort of in-band FEC in it.
If it has in-band FECs, then this one we probably won't want to.
That'd be like MPEG-2 transport streams or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
So so I guess the question is there interest in this? And I know it's always hard to get traction here for things in the IPTV space rather than the conferencing space. I mean, it's obviously not a big draft, other than this question of, is there enough information for the marker to do something sensible?
The important input I got is that we should provide some way to specify the percentage of each.
Yeah,
of
or
each one of
either the percentages or
of each priority.
yeah, either explicitly signal it or give guidance to a middle box to monitor and guess or something like that.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
That's a viable.
My suggestion might also be, since there is a way when signaling header extensions, you can put parameters on them. Maybe it's just a parameter saying I'm doing this marking also, which could also be where that could go.
Okay, because currently we don't have any signaling because you assume the regular. Right. Because it's backward probability. To do that, we need to have some parameter added to the signaling.
Yeah. So,
Mosinati, I'll just echo the same comments I've had for the last several sessions when this is brought up. I don't have any objection to the work, but my reservation about it is that it requires a certain amount of coupling between all system components. Senders and receivers need to have a certain level of understanding. So the reason you bring it to IETF would be to standardize that understanding, but it seems to me pretty hard to actually standardize the level of understanding well enough so that senders and receivers have a good feel for what the percentages and relative priorities are of these packets. So that's why I think if you already have coupling between your senders and receivers, you don't really need IETF to do anything. It's only if you want interoperable implementations of this that you would need to standardize it, and in which case I'm not sure that it's really clear to an arbitrary vendor receiver what an arbitrary vendor sender would mark as.
From a receiver point of view, it just said that instead of 1 bit from droppable frame, it has basically 3 bits for droppable
well, I think
frame.
again his point is just what the distribution is.
The distribution, and we agree. We talked about the distribution. Right? Yeah. I think it's viable to try to find a way to.
If a sender were explicitly saying, "Hey, I expect this stream to be 10% marked 0 and 25% marked 1 and so on and so forth," would that? I mean, I don't know if that's practical, but if they were able to do that, would that resolve your concern?
You mean it's some sort of like a SDES announcement or something
either
like that?
SDES or an SDP or something.
Yeah, if there was something to tell, if there was something to give guidance to a receiver, then it may start to make sense. But without something to know what the coupling between sender and receiver is, I don't see how it could be interoperable.
Okay.
Complex, that has to be something that's signaled to the middle boxes, not to
right.
not to the endpoints.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll look at it. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we'll encourage Ronnie to look at that. And
so I will look and try to update the document, and then we'll talk about whether it makes sense already. Okay? Thank you.
Right. So I believe that is the agenda, all the agenda for AVT Core, unless anybody else has any comments. Otherwise, we will get out of here and move on to payload. And I'll have to get to eat my lunch.
I'm sorry.
Giving a presentation is also important.
Okay, so let's see. Okay, we do have all this. I'll try to connect now and be ready for it. Jonathan?
Yeah?
Do we need to change something here to be in payload instead of AVT?
I'd suggest